My name is Jeron Ignis Lee Harrison. I am a writer. I was a writer before anything else I'm doing. First grade even, I would make my own comic books. I would write stories and just like draw action figures because I wanted to create something. It'd be like 2-page comic books, you fold it, and then title, story. That morphed into other things later on when I started doing music. It was just translating it to a different medium, and then filmmaking was just another way to go about it. But writing is the core of everything. Music was just another way to communicate because like you grow up in the Bronx, like hip hop is all around, it's like a cultural thing. Instead of writing stories just like as fiction or as comic books, I was just like, yo, let me try to write a story as a rhyme. Virtue was about a concept of virtue, but like because there's like a textbook definition that some people know, I had to figure out a way to explain it without explaining it too literal, so I can like make music about it and make a film about it. So that's when you have to dive into like what storytelling is and what is a moment that can happen that you can see that moment and be like, this is what virtue is. And when you have that story, then you can build a world around it. So that's what I did. We black, so like at a certain point where you look back into like your history, like as a black American, like sometimes you hit like a wall. I don't really know what happened. They just say their ancestors were like on a plantation, you know, they were slaves. When we get to write stories like Virtue, we get to like tap in and be like, okay, let's know that we were kings. So what did that look like? What did they go through? What did they do to get us to this point? You have to go by intuition first, what you feel like at a primal level, and then let your intellect think it through afterwards. So you got to lay everything out, and then you start making sense of putting the pieces together and like, okay, this is how it's gonna flow for this specific story, even things get left out. So when I wrote Calypso, it's the same thing. Whereas like there's all these different elements, right? There's like a love story, there's a war going on, there's racial implications, there's political implications. You got to get all that in there, and then you got to make it make sense after the fact. And when you're trying to make it make sense after the fact, we had to rely on the experience of other people to make it literal too. Like as soon as we interviewed a soldier who actually fought in Vietnam, and he told us his story, and the other black soldiers he knew who stayed behind in Vietnam felt a conflict after MLK died because they didn't know if they should be fighting for America that treats them that way. They gave me all I needed to know to connect and be like, okay, this is already a real emotion. I just have to weave it into what I already wrote. What I got better at is I know that my writing is a lot less judgmental. Like when I go into a rough draft, I care a lot less than I did when I was younger, where I would like try to make sure each line complemented the piece. I still do that, but now it's like that first draft, I don't care. Whatever I think has to go there. I see myself writing in TV show format at least, so I'm writing week to week, building a world, working with other people and other writers, and helping them bring their concepts out with my perspective, whatever way I can. Us doing it ourselves and going through all that made us better filmmakers. In the future, I see us taking it into our own hands and pushing it even further to expand that for other local filmmakers like us who have to do it by themselves. Take influence from different mediums. I think that's the most important part. As a musician, you can't always only get inspired by music, but you got to be able to get inspired by visuals. As a visual artist, you don't always get inspired by other visuals, but get inspired by life or music. I am Jeron Lee Harrison, and that's a wrap.